intellectually, but also reaching out. Um, During the pandemic, I was in a deployed location, and me staying connected was very important into understanding what is going on back home in the States and, what's going on in my deployed location. So whether it is talking to someone physically, 6 feet apart, of course, or reaching out different ways, because this pandemic has showed us that we have to be very creative and that we have to connect in other ways besides the typical, hey, how you doing, come to my office, come in to see me and things like that. We had to find ways to connect, whether it was through text, whether it's through social media, whether it's through Zoom meetings or FaceTime, actually having to think outside the box. And I have to think back into when I initially applied for this program. I knew I wanted to make a change within the Air Force, but throughout this journey, my why has kind of changed. I wanted to make a bigger impact in being connected, not only just to Air Force and veterans, but to also to the community, because I don't want to just be severed, just strictly into one category. I want to connect globally if I could, whether it's reaching through one person or through many. So
Thank you, Romney. Thank you for that response. I'm not sure, Shaylin, if you're here.
She's here. She's on the phone.
Okay, great. All right, Shaylin, so the same question to you. Good morning. What does being connected mean to you and how you're staying connected to your goal of completing the MSW program here at RU? Or are you starting your career as a social worker?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me this morning. Being connected for me is really feeling that support. So whether it's support out in the field, at school, or through my friends and loved ones. Obviously, COVID has created some challenges and made us have to get a little bit creative with how to feel connected. But with that, I have found for me that not only feeling supported by others, but also sharing an experience. So switching to doing everything online with school and also doing online with my field placement. One thing that has really helped me to still feel really connected is my supervision. And that is because we're doing it in a group setting. And so it gives that feeling of still being able to dialogue with colleagues and with classmates, talk about shared experiences in class, as well as the things we're going through at our field placement. That has been very, very helpful for me. And being able to, in my own personal life, being able to try and share those important moments. I had my daughter about 6 months ago. And so being able to feel like I can still share those moments with those I love, even though we're physically apart, not only due to COVID, but I am a military spouse. So we are physically very far apart as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaylin. And those are some very valid points, and congratulations to you. And lastly, Caroline, if you're here, we'll be posing that same question to you. What does being connected mean to you, and how are you staying connected to your goal of completing the MSW program here at Rutgers or starting a career as a social worker? Caroline.
I think she's still trying to get in.
Okay, perfect. Okay, sure. So then I'll go ahead and thank you, panelists, for your responses. Those were some great points and absolutely valid points. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Lauren, to move on with the next question. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Sewanza and Mark and everybody here, students, faculty, staff. I know we have some MSWs who also would like to share, but we definitely have the space for you once we get through all the questions. So stay tuned, hang in there. I can't wait to hear what you have to contribute. I'm Lauren Snedeker. I'm the coordinator for the Aging and Health Certificate Program. So it's such a pleasure to be here. I want to ask the students, Karima, Romney, all the students, as you continue to develop your clinical wisdom while simultaneously experiencing and witnessing the two pandemics, systemic racism, inequality, COVID-19, how will you remain connected? Big question.
Sure, I'll start.
Thank you, Karima.
Sure. I will remain connected by focusing on my mission. That is to advocate for clients who have been victims of trauma, racism, inequality, and those who have experienced tremendous loss during this pandemic, loss of loved ones and financial loss. So for me, it's going back to the core of why I've entered social work to begin with. It's just always been a passion of mine to help those in need when people feel as though they don't have any help, any connection, any resources. That's why I chose social work, so I can be that source of resource to bring a little bit of hope as much as I can on my level. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Karima. I love the idea of bringing a little bit of hope. That really resonates. Thank you so, so much. I'll now invite Romney to share as well, to reflect. Again, the question is, as you continue to develop your clinical wisdom, because you're students, but you have wisdom before the program, throughout the program, after the program. So while you're developing and simultaneously experiencing and witnessing the two pandemics, how will you remain connected?
For me, how would I remain connected is sharing my own personal thoughts on how I feel and how I'm experiencing both pandemics. To give a brief example, to go back to my deployment when everything was kicking off as far as those racial injustices and also COVID, we were starting to have diversity and inclusion conversations in my work section. And I was giving my experience. I was sharing my stories of what I've experienced being in the military and being an African-American woman. And being able to shed that light and shed my experience was a way for me to stay connected, because I was able to give a glimpse of my day-to-day, what I've experienced, to other people, to educate others. And I hope to do the same even in my work, because sometimes it's just some people don't have that experience or that knowledge to understand. And for them to even gain just a little bit of what I might experience or what someone else might experience, because they might be feeling a sense of frustration and not understanding the why of things that are happening, but to be able to provide just a glimmer of that, so they can take that nugget to maybe explore a little bit more, would be a way that I could connect with clients or just the general public. So I think that's just another way of just sharing my experience as a way of being connected.
Thank you so much, Romney, for being so brave and using your life experience to educate and call people into these very, very important conversations and learning opportunities. I really appreciate that. Thank you both for answering this question. And again, students who are on the line will have opportunity to circle back to these questions and reflect together as a group. So I'd like to invite my colleague, Rupa, I think you're here. Yes.
Yes.
To continue on with our discussion. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Lauren. And I'm sorry, we've had some issues with joining in. So I'm on my phone. So I apologize if there's issues with like my audio or video. But the next question is for Shaylin and Carolyn. I think you've been able to join through the phone as well. So my question is, what has been really challenging in terms of remaining connected during this time? If you could talk a little bit about the strategies you've used to manage those challenges, maybe social media, maybe other forms of communication that has worked for you or not. So I'm going to ask Shaylin if you could answer first, and then Caroline, we're really looking forward to hearing your responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupa. I would say the biggest challenge with connectedness right now is the physical distance. So lacking that in-person connection whether that is through a shared experience with colleagues or that is with clients, and that rapport you build with that in-person connection that you have, being able to read body language, being able to kind of backtrack if something was said wrong. My field placement, we do all through text on a crisis line, which presents some challenges with connectedness in people are not able to hear your tone, they're not able to see your language. And when you're in person, there is a trust and a shared experience, I think, that is built a little easier than when we had the physical distance. Additionally, it's been difficult for me because prior to COVID, I was very active in-person social justice events, whether that was going to see speakers, whether that was going to different protests or gatherings. And with the pandemic, that has presented a lot of challenges, and I really miss that, and I really want to be able to be a part of that. Part of the ways that I'm addressing those challenges for myself to try and stay connected is, as I mentioned before, we have our group supervision, so that really helps with being able to have that shared experience. But otherwise, in social media, I follow a lot of accounts that bring attention to different ways that I can continue to be active in social justice issues that I'm very passionate about, and being able to try and, whether it's writing to my legislatures, whether it is signing petitions, or it is different ways to take action in trying to get different legislation passed. So that's how I'm staying connected in the meantime until we are able to have that physical closeness again. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaylin. That was quite amazing. It's really interesting to see how when something like this happens, we kind of push our boundaries and discover new ways of doing what we wish to do. So thank you for that. Carolyn, are you able to respond? I know you were able to join, I guess, with your phone, right? Okay, great.
Yes, I'm here. So just like Shaylin said, I would say that the physical distance is definitely the biggest challenge. And professionally, that, we're in these field placements. A lot of us are trying to do counseling. We're working with people and we're not getting the body language. We're not getting a lot of this emotional input. On a more personal level, I've found that I'm sure like many people, there's a lot of emotional ups and downs we go through being so isolated. And one strategy that I have been trying to kind of stay connected is staying connected to myself, knowing what I can and can't handle, what to engage in, and just listen to my feelings and feel my feelings. And we deal with this personally, and when sometimes you want to reach out, you don't know if you should talk to somebody, and sometimes it's okay to just kind of sit back and feel your feelings and stay connected to yourself. And then when you are able to connect with others, however you may do that, you can kind of bring your best self there. So that's kind of how I've been looking at it.
Thank you so much for that. It's really interesting to listen to how you guys have kind of, have been doing what you do, have been learning as you're going along. This is really helpful. I'm going to pass this on to my colleague Bernardo for his questions, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Well, thank you, Rupa, and hello, everyone. Again, my name is Bernardo Geraldo, and I just want to welcome you all to this, forum where we have the opportunity to be able to talk about some of these topics. And I think it's really important for us to be able to address some of these issues. So I will address this particular question to each of the students. So I will start with Shaylin. Let me start with you. And the question that I'm posing is, what are some of the lessons learned from practicing social work during the pandemic?
Thank you. I've learned quite a few lessons. I will keep it to our time limit. In my placement, as I mentioned, so I'm working a crisis line with survivors and victims of sexual assault. The majority of our users are children. And during this pandemic, it has been quite the lesson in social work in one, realizing how severe it is for the clients that we are providing services to, because they're unable to escape the abuse that they are experiencing. They also, for upwards of a year now, if they're not back in school, have absolutely no outside support system whatsoever. And what that really does for someone's mental health who is already experiencing such severe trauma. With that, when I am providing services, I'm doing so in my home. And so I am unable to turn to a colleague and kind of decompress everything that was just said. It's, you work with your clients and then take some time for yourself, but then right back to your family. And that in and of itself can be really, really difficult in trying not to carry the trauma that you were just working through with someone into your everyday life. On a positive side, I've come to realize that we will be able to, past the pandemic, be able to continue providing telehealth services and being able to work with clients that previously had such big barriers to accessing services. So whether it's transportation, childcare in a rural area, whatever it may be, this has opened up the door to being able to provide help and services to people we potentially couldn't before using telehealth. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaylin. These are really important points. I know that many clients are experiencing many of the challenges from the pandemic and being isolated and not getting, dealing with the challenges of being at home and whatever those challenges are. And to your point, looking at the positive side in terms of what this online forum can offer to people that maybe didn't have the opportunities that they had before. So thank you for that. So Karima, I'll ask you the same question. What are some of the lessons learned from practicing social work during the pandemic?
Thank you for your question. Some lessons learned are absolutely the power of listening. Recently in one of my classes, spirituality and social work, we talked about compassionate listening, deep listening. And this is the ability to listen to another's grief, pain, and adversity in a way that will reduce his or her feelings of sorrow. And when we're not able to be in person, the best therapy is to give our clients our undivided attention and listen. I've been fortunate in my internship to be still in person. It's a residential program, young women from the age of 17 to 21 who are there for a variety of needs, assault, sexual violence, psychological disorders. And it has been really, really moving to just be able to be in one-on-one sessions, group sessions, and listen. And I sense and I can feel the weight that kind of falls off of them when they realize that someone is listening and validating their feelings, validating what they're going through. And you just have no idea how much that can do for someone. Also, in terms of ourselves as social workers, this pandemic can intensify burnout, compassion fatigue, or secondary trauma. So it's important, to be in tune with those emotions and feelings, which can affect social workers even in non-pandemic times. So during this pandemic, it's even more important to practice self-care and to be aware of our own physical and mental health. Those are some of the lessons that I've learned. Thank you.
Thank you, Karima. I think, I think it's one of the themes that we were talking about is how sometimes it's hard to other people to be able to pay attention to the body language and really be in tune with them. And to your point, I think listening is one of those key major skills that we really emphasize in the social work program and just in general. And, being really pushing that extra mile to really pay attention, I think is important, listening, and that they can feel that from you. That's important. And
absolutely, to
the self-care point, I think figuring out ways that we can manage all of this and taking time for ourselves is key. Romney, could I ask you the same question?
Thank you. One of the lessons that I've kind of learned during this pandemic is a lot of people, I brought it up during my supervision, that a lot of introverts have been thriving during this pandemic. A lot of us extroverts, we're so used to, being social and being out there and, wanting to explore that. I've noticed that a lot of during just like Zoom meetings and, seeing clients kind of like who are just really into, being at home, like they're thriving. And a lot of people haven't really paid attention to it. And one of my supervisors like, yeah, I really didn't think about that. And I thought it was very interesting that, maybe sometimes we've kind of had that thought of like, well, maybe, telehealth, I don't know. But I've learned that it was just interesting to see that dynamic with some of the clients. Like some people, I wouldn't say for all, but that's what I've seen. A lot of people have thrived and some people haven't. But another thing that I've learned was to be very flexible, and a lot of ups and downs. Even with my own internship in field, I had to be very flexible and to figure out how to make that work for me. What does it look like? And I think that's another lesson that people have learned, is that we've got to be flexible, that some of the things that we used to do, we have to be a little bit innovative and kind of go with the flow, because internet can work and sometimes internet cannot work. So right. I think that's one of a few of the lessons that I've learned.
Thank you. I think you're bringing up a good point in terms of, the flexibility. I think from March last year, it's almost going to be a year now that we've been dealing with all these changes, and all of us had to adapt one way or another. And that flexibility, I think, plays a key role in terms of being able to negotiate the things that are coming our way. So I think it's important, from learning to be online and negotiating the environments and having pets and people behind you and things, and still moving along and staying in tune with the client and listening. I think these are important points. Caroline, I'll ask you the same question.
So one of the biggest lessons that I have been reminded of doing this work during the pandemic is that, unsurprisingly, the distribution of the burden that comes with a pandemic is not equitable. So we're all working with different clients, and some of them are really a lot more heavily impacted by this than others. And another more positive note would be that I think we are being forced to go through this collective bonding. It is kind of a unifying experience for everyone, but at the same time, it's a trauma bonding, right? It's a global trauma bonding. And the way that we've all had to adapt to that is unfortunate, but also in some ways very beautiful. And as we look to, also in my field placement, I realize more and more there are just so many impacts that happen that you would never ever anticipate. And I think that these things will be latent and lasting. And we just throughout the rest of our careers, we're going to continue to see these things pop up that are impacts of this pandemic. I'm at Virtua Cancer Center, and some of the clients that I'm working with are at the end of their lives. And in addition to having cancer, they are now in a position where maybe they had all these things on their bucket list that they don't get to do. That's not an impact that I would have anticipated or even thought of. And I'm sure everyone in their field placements has kind of seen just this additional layer of trauma that people are experiencing, in addition to the other problems that already existed, right? So I think it's something that's just kind of an additional layer that we're going to have to keep working with for the rest of our careers.
Thank you, Caroline. It's certainly this with the pandemic has brought out a lot of highlighted a lot of the inequities that we know it's out there, but even more so for those who are groups that are marginalized, we know that it's impacted them even more. And we are, we're hoping that there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but that we have a lot of work ahead of us to be able to address some of the things that come up from this in this past year. So thank you all for answering those questions, and I will turn this over to Mark Lamar for the final part of the event.
Thank you all so much. That's sort of our bucket list of questions, just to take Caroline's phrase. These were the wishes that we had of the things we could get accomplished and the things we could do with each of the students, to ask these things, to ask you to consider, and how thoughtful you've been thinking through your answers and organizing them. And I appreciate so much, the areas of emphasis that you pointed out, the issues of continuity, actually the benefits of, well, we'll be able to provide remote services in ways that may be an advantage. That was not intended. Nobody thought that was a great idea, but lo and behold, we may be able to have a wider, a further, and a broader reach. Karima, I have to thank you for your comment about compassion. And I'm going to say a thing or two here, and then maybe we'll open this up. But I'm trying to time this a little bit. But I had read a lot of poetry during this time and did everything I could to use art and music and poetry and humor, and it's all punctuate maybe something you said, and just add this in. The intensity, the need to be compassionate is higher than ever, really, the need for that, the call for that. And so I'm speaking a real brief verse from a poet, Miller Williams, who is from Arkansas. And it's entitled Compassion. And Miller Williams says, "Have compassion for everyone you meet, even if they don't want it. What seems conceit, bad manners, or cynicism is always a sign of things that no ears have heard, that no eyes have seen. You don't know what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone. And how often have we ourselves misinterpreted or assumed or calculated something that has had us lay compassion aside when that's really what was needed." And I think that's the risk, and you spoke so well to that, Karima. Thank you for that. Romney, speaking about flexibility, go ahead, Karima.
I just was saying thank you. I appreciate that that part that you just read. That really spoke volumes. Thank you.
Romney, talking about being flexible, needing to be flexible. Would you have intentionally been that flexible, or is something you found yourself having to do? Was this in your plan?
Well, in the military, they always tell us to be flexible. So it's kind of been ingrained, but it was brought to light because I was supposed to come back in April of 2020, and I didn't come back until July 2020. So I was there for pretty much almost 9 months. And granted, you're set an expectation of, hey, this is only going to last for a certain amount of time, just like we thought the pandemic would be, only last from this point to this point, because every other pandemic we've had, it only lasted for a little bit. But this one seemed to have some longevity to it that we weren't really prepared for. So having to be flexible, riding the highs and the lows of, is there a vaccine? Is the vaccine going to work? How long are we going to wear masks for? Like, it's a lot of unknowns, and having that understanding of always be flexible in this moment. We have to be, there's no end all be all, but we have to understand that there's going to be a lot of new normals and a lot of new changes. So we have to be willing to be flexible in understanding that and being able to ride that course and go through it. So.
And it's interesting, you're working for a company, you said the Air Force, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
I'm
an active duty member, yes.
Right, I'm using that term generously or broadly, but you're working for a company that prides itself on precision, on organization, on planfulness, on anticipation, but at the same time is wisely citing and activating the role of the need to be flexible, right?
Yes.
Air Force knows a few things about that, right? And Bernardo Geraldo, who's a Navy veteran, could speak from the water side of things, I suppose, having done a few years on the Carl Vinson. But anyway, interesting far and wide experiences. And then I just wanted to comment, Caroline, you said some things you should write down. I sure as heck did. You said global trauma bonding. Please write that down, put that somewhere, memorialize that. And then you said impacts, and there's some alliteration on a Wednesday morning that I can't tell you how much I appreciate. Impacts will be latent and lasting. What a combination. The enduringness of these not easy to see effects. And you're so I'll just say you're so smart, or you're so wise or insightful to frame it that way. But thank you for that language that helped us kind of build on Romney's lessons of flexibility, Karima's call to be compassionate, and Shaylin's observations about these opportunities to provide remote services. Unintended, unforeseen benefits. Who knew, right? Who knew? Who could have written this script? So, well, here's the thing. Now we're at time a little bit. We've got some time, and what I wanted to do was ask the group, and I know we've got folks here who have experiences that are rich, and you've sort of heard the questions, you've heard the things we've thought about, but I wonder if we could open up to the group our in a sense, our charge, which was to answer the question, what does connected mean to you, and how are you staying connected to your goal? And this is maybe some consideration for the larger group. And anybody's eligible. We have faculty, we have staff here. And as Caroline pointed out, this was a globally experienced event. These are globally experienced events, I should say. So nobody's got the inside story on this. Nobody's got the best answer. We're all working to answers together. But I wonder what the group thinks about this issue as to what does being connected mean to you, and how are you staying connected to your goal and to your work and to yourself. Lauren Snedeker raised that in some of our test questions. How are you staying connected to yourself, which is so central. Danielle, I wonder what Danielle's thinking.
So my answer is basically, it may not sound like it's answering your question, but I'm gonna just give you what I thought. So like I was talking, like I'm on social media all the time, and sometimes I see people who post things like, I'm not wearing a mask. People who wear masks are foolish. Blah 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 blah. And like it's like, and I think it's just like, well, this is the way we end the pandemic. We end the pandemic by wearing masks, washing our hands, getting the vaccine. But it's just like, and then you talk to a person, and they're not just people who are just being foolish to be foolish. They're people who are fed up with, things not being normal. And that's something we all share. So it's like, if you talk to somebody, you don't agree with, you can find ways that you can collaborate with them. You can share with them, and you can also find out sometimes you share the same grief with them. And it's a way, my goal is to become like a clinical teacher. And it's just like, if you don't know this about people that you disagree with, that you probably do agree more than you disagree in some ways, then you'll never be a competent teacher. That's just, so it's basically, that's what I've been trying to do. That may not answer your question, but I hope that's helpful.
Danielle, thank you so much, and for stepping into the first response. I appreciate it. And you've gotten some other colleagues to step up. And I wonder if Kevin, and then I know Deborah would like to say something. Kevin, how about speaking with us about this?
Well, first and foremost, it's great to see everyone again. So put
You
the
too.
webcam back on. So I guess the first question to ask of whether or not how I've been connected to myself. It's been interesting because of a lot of stuff that I've been experiencing as far as being connected to the internet has always been something that I've always had no problems with. But as far as just being connected, I think it's just like the interactions that I've been dealing with online has been ever just as important as dealing with connections as offline, but through social media at the same time. So it's just more of a lot of self-reflection, just basically trying to figure out where I place myself into the future as well. So it's just like there's a lot of variables that are coming into play, whether if it's just how the pandemic is going, what's the definition of a new normal, or when are we going to go back, or how we're going to adapt after the pandemic goes. So it's just a lot of speculation and a lot of flaws that we're seeing from there. So that's the first part of where I'll say from that. As far as how I've been connected to my goals specifically, so as of right, just a quick disclosure, I am working as a contact tracer within Bergen County, so there's that. So part of me of keeping connected to my goal is actually honing some of the skills that I've learned that goes beyond the interactions I've had with my field placement. So in a way, there's a lot of trial and error, a lot of figuring myself, and then just trying to find my own style too, so, which has been helpful. So I have been lucky and grateful of being able to be part of the COVID frontline, I guess, but not really frontline because I'm also working from home. So there's that. But as I think career wise, ultimately, I think I'm just kind of looking into a lot more options. I didn't expect myself to work in something with healthcare, and I do believe that eventually I might be working something along with COVID specifically. For me specifically, I've actually had some not experience directly with COVID, but had some of my family members and some acquaintances that have lost or have been affected significantly with COVID. So it's something that I'm going to be looking more towards into. As far as the social work practice itself, I do think that there is definitely going to be some modifications within our profession. I think that teletherapy is definitely going to be an option, which we should seriously look into, as well as having the access and inequality and equity of even accessing. Because unfortunately, for a lot of people, I'm blessed I have the technology and connection to do so, but as I realize that not many people have the same type of infrastructure as well too. So it's going to be a lot of policy, a lot of access and so forth. But I'm going on a tangent, so I'll just leave it at that. So, but thank you for letting me respond to this question.
Not so tangential. Thank you for that walkthrough, and also for pointing out your contact tracing work. These days, doing remote contact tracing is the front line. That's absolutely an authentic front line. And were this an older time, we'd be going door to door, and that's not what we do so much anymore. The door to door is the reach into people's lives electronically, digitally, and that's the attempt that public health groups are making. You said a phrase that I think really was something about both hopeful and so thought-provoking, and it was, I'm trying to reflect where to place myself in the future. And again, we're a couple of good things about that. It warms me, and I'm so happy that you're picturing yourself in the future, where to place yourself. That talks about efficacy. That talks about the next step, a new day, another season, right? So that's just wonderful. But that active envisioning, I think, is sort of an opportunity for you, and you describe it so well, for all of us to picture. So what next? Where does this go? How does this turn out? And I think everybody in their conscious selves, in their planning selves, in their vision boarding selves, in their bad dreams at night, whatever it is, we're picturing what is our next version of ourselves. How are we after, sort of quote, after this, and how do we place ourselves? But the placing yourself in the future is more intentional, and that's pretty terrific. That's about envisioning a plan, envisioning a future version of yourself. So thank you. No rambling there at all. I appreciate that. How about Deborah? You wanted to share some thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you. It's been great. In terms of being connected, before this, I'm a person who ran around all over the place and wasn't home very much. But in terms of being connected, I had to start with being connected to myself. And because sometimes it's hard to sit with feelings for myself, it's just really 1 second at a time. One thing that I chose to do is, because when gyms close and stuff like that, every day I walk in nature. So I've been more connected to nature, which I've found to be a healing thing. I've also reached out a lot to school friends. and they've been very supportive of me. And I've had to ask for what I need, be really cognizant, even logistically in home. My husband works from home. I work from home. Now my daughter was home from college for a while, and that can get very sticky. You're trying to listen and you can't hear because someone else is making noise. But as opposed to what Kevin said, which was really great, I had to focus on the here and now, because the last 2 weeks before last semester ended, I had a sudden stroke and I was really in intensive care for 10 days. And during that time, when I didn't know if I was going to live at first, but I did, thank God, I was just very connected to my focus on graduating. And that helped me get on and know, like in COVID, the trauma everyone's going through, some people have additional trauma, like now I had numerous traumas. So I just, even at the end of when I was in the hospital, I did dial into class, and I didn't just lay down and say, okay, sorry for me. I did that, and that was very helpful. And so I chose to continue this semester, even with a little bit of accommodation. The other thing I was going to say in terms of connection, to me, connection is so important to me. And so one thing I've done is personally knowing the people who are not as well connected, I've sent them stuff, or maybe given them when I had a little extra money, so people could also feel like they were, it was a good thing for them. So, those are the ways that, those are things that have helped me. And also in my internship, I'm in a different internship because the other one was not open because of COVID. And I'm teaching workshops on healthy relationships and resilience and stuff like that. So that's been really great.
I want to thank you, Deborah. And I wonder, any of our team want to respond to that or comment on Deborah's generous sharing?
Now we've been working with, watching Deborah grow semester after semester. And I want to thank you for being so open about all the challenges that you've been through, but you've also been so heroic in how you've moved forward, and brave. And everyone here has been sharing their own personal story. And that's really how we do learn and stay connected, because we learn from each other. So thank you for coming today, Deborah. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Mary Beth. You've been a great support.
Mark, if I could just jump in.
Please, Rupa. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is a privilege to be able to speak to everybody and learn from you guys. Because I'm a trauma therapist and trauma is what I do, I teach trauma. It really sort of has been the work that I've engaged in. It's been really interesting to teach trauma in the middle of a pandemic, right? And to be able to see how students coped with not just their lives, but also with the course load and their internships and all of that. And something that comes to my mind, and when we talk about trauma, is this post-trauma growth. Many of you were talking about, reinventing yourself, looking at the future, but looking at the here and now as well. And Shailen and Karima was talking, you guys were discussing this being listening, having compassion, being present. And I think that's the goal that we all aspire for, is in social work, irrespective of the work that we do, we want to be present. And I think that the pandemic, because we are not in person, because we are not looking at body language, because we can't pick up those cues that we've begun to depend on, we've been forced to be present in a way that's mind, body, spirit, that's completely engaging ourselves. And I think nobody wanted the pandemic, nobody asked for this, but I think it has really taught us those skills that we otherwise may not have had, of being present with our entire selves, because we have to cue in, we have to look at the faces, we have to look at whatever we can, or even not, just hear the voice and pick up cues from the voice from our clients, right? So I think in many ways, it has taught us skills, even in our own lives, that we probably wouldn't have had otherwise. So it's real interesting to listen to all of you and discuss this idea of compassion and listening and being present and being flexible and adaptive. Such important skills for all of us. So thank you for sharing that.
Lauren.
I just want to, thank you so much, Mark and Rupa and Mary Beth and all the students. I just wanted to jump in to share a little bit as well, to kind of piggyback off of those skills and the post-traumatic growth and the adaptivity and the flexivity and all of those other skills that students are acquiring. You know, as someone who started with Rutgers only virtually, I started in April of last year and have developed such beautiful relationships with my colleagues and staff, and you know, that I get to work alongside virtually. And so I just wanted to note also, you know, once you all graduate, congratulations, it's happening, it's coming, get excited. I'm so excited for you. You have these other skills about, you know, professionalism and engaging and rapport building that will also serve you so well in our new world, whatever it may be, which likely will include a lot more virtual platforms, right? So you're also going to be taking away those skills that likely would have been, you know, on the job learning, but you're kind of ahead of the game through these experiences. So I think, you know, just speaking from my own post-traumatic growth as, you know, starting this new role mid-pandemic, I can attest that it's possible and that you'll all go very far in the field because of these experiences. So just know that. Thank you.
Well,
Hi,
go ahead, please, go ahead.
Hi, this is Trinae. I'm on audio. I hope everyone can hear me. I just wanted to share, it's just been so great just taking everything in, what our students are sharing and their experiences. And, you know, what comes to mind most for me is that, you know, I think in the beginning, a lot of us was languaging, whether it was students or staff or faculty, professionals in the field, you know, when we get back to that space, or when we get back in person, or when we get back to normal, and we're going to do A, B, and C. And I think the thing that's exciting to me is that, you know, we're in this pandemic, we're pioneering a new space, and we are establishing the connectivity now. It's not of a wait and see. We're navigating this kind of new world together, and we are, you know, carving out a space where we can talk about the challenges, and we can talk about the growth, and we can talk about the progression and the regression, and how we are thriving and how we are not thriving. And this is what we do as social workers. We are pioneers, and doing this now just means so much in a multidimensional way for all of us, every single one of us. And I think that is the most important thing that we can walk away with. Connectivity in person is beautiful, and connectivity in this space is beautiful too. And no matter where, no matter the environment, the forum, it is about just connection and how we make it happen, no matter the circumstance, how we make it happen. So it's been great just taking in how you guys are making it happen now. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
I know Trinae very well now for the last 8 years, and I picture her saying all of this face-to-face in person. I would know her body language. I would know how she would be using her hands, how she'd be smiling, how her face would look, how she would say it to a group of us, and we'd be raptly listening, and she would, we would really hear this in that way. But thank you, Trinae. I just picture you doing this in person in Newark, up in the Newark campus, in the hallway. Teaching as you do all the time, and it's for which I'm the beneficiary in innumerable moments. You know, I see your faces come up on the screen, and I teach a class on Tuesdays, and a few students are here from that class, and in the fall. And I absolutely mean this. When I'm signing off from my class with students, when I'm signing on, I often will have some music playing, but I'll see faces come on. I'll see people rousing themselves, getting set, getting into position. It's anticipatory. I'm expecting them. I think they're expecting me. Mostly they're expecting each other, which is the best, very best part, right? The student to student, the community. And, you know, the recognitions, I mean, even in these little square boxes of ourselves, these one-dimensional places that we are, where we all, you know, I'm trying to put emotion into this camera, this little light on my laptop, so that you know how I feel about this. And maybe we pull it off, maybe it works, but that feeling, that being there, seeing the faces, recognizing, it's a physical feeling. It's a, yes, that's good, or how glad I am, or whatever it is. It's a rightness about getting our work done. And then the leaving it's the signing off. It's the, if it were in class, we'd be turning off the lights, we'd be closing a door, students would be leaving, it'd be the end of a day or night. People would be, we'd hear chairs moving around and all that. Well, we're kind of signaling off and signing off and saying farewells until another time. But it's those comings and goings that absolutely, at least for what we have here, is it'll have to do. And I'm just grateful that we have this, that we are able to do this. I clearly want to get back into our in-person world, but I'm grateful that this has worked as well as this worked too. I sort of make peace with the limitations of it and start to see you really do get to know people. You do reach across those dimensional limitations. So hearing Trene's voice, I knew exactly how she would look as she just pitched us that proposition. Exactly. I'm so happy to hear your voice.
This is all great stuff going on. It's so exciting.
How about others? Other thoughts? How are you? Any thoughts about connection, or I'm wondering what has anyone done in terms of trying something new that was different for them, something new or something they hadn't touched in a while, and they found themselves re-experiencing it or daring to try again. Anybody?
I mean,
Go ahead,
I
Danielle.
Yeah. So I'm a stand-up comedian. I make jokes about, being a counselor, and also about my disability and, other things. I only incriminate myself here. Okay, so I found that, making self-deprecating jokes helps other people feel less intimidated around me and more inclined to open up to me. I mean, like on a personal or professional level, case depending. And, it's also taught me about, how, sometimes making jokes with, clients can actually help them, or encouraging them to see things in a more humorous light. And
Danielle, thank you for that. You'd be interested to know that humor, and this was sort of one of the promises for today, there are faculty at Stanford University Business School who operate a course called Humor, Serious Business, and their names are Jennifer Acker and Naomi Bagdonas. And they approach humor and the way they teach this in business very seriously. And they've done a lot of research. They've done a lot of research about the place of humor in our lives. And just a quick comment or two about that. They assert to us, and these are Stanford business professors, not always a laughing matter, but they'll say not laughing is a mistake. It costs you health, creativity, relationship building, and negotiating power. And they're seeing it as a functional, a piece of us from a number of perspectives. We've all fallen off the humor cliff, they say. Between the ages of 23 and 70, our ability to laugh declines precipitously, a phenomenon that they call the humor cliff. An average 4-year-old laughs up to 300 times a day. This is their research. The average 40-year-old laughs that many times in 2.5 months. And that's in average times, which these are not. Add an endless pandemic, global warming, and whatever is happening with everyone's quarantine hair, and it's a miracle we're laughing at all, say they. Humor changes our brains. A lot of humor's power is chemical. When we laugh, our brains release a cocktail of healthy hormones like dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, and this changes not just how we feel, for example, more calm, confident, resourceful, but how others perceive us as more influential, likable, and trustworthy. Oxytocin, by the way, is the same hormone released during sex and childbirth, both moments when evolutionarily it benefits us to feel bonded. In other words, having sex, giving birth, and laughing with colleagues on Zoom have more in common than you might think. So these are two serious professors of business at Stanford, which knows a few things or two about cutthroatism, and they're having some humor and inspiration about it all. Anyone else? Anyone else want to bring something into us, please?
So one of the things that I was infamously known for, at least with my, which was kind of scoffed at when I was in my field placement, was that people found that memes were a little bit ridiculous. But when you find some of these memes that you see, like for example, I'm gonna give a shout out plug to therapy memes on Facebook because I follow them and they're pretty hilarious within our profession. I find laughing at just the spontaneous laughter, just looking at things, pretty helpful because it just makes it you can relate to them, you can kind of laugh at them, you can kind of see like why have some kind of a little bit critical casual impressions of them too. But as far as me specifically, what I've been coping with or just getting myself into, I've been doing a lot of virtual reality gaming. So there's a game called VR Chat, which there's multiple communities of different people you can interact with specifically, and there's some things that I'm still trying to figure out how this goes, but it is something that has kept me a little bit more social. So I would say that that has been definitely one of the best things that I've gotten myself into. And just to kind of also amplify the meaning of that, there's no such thing there shouldn't be any reason why you should diminish online relationships with interaction with friends. And this is something that I've been trying to cut myself away with that mentality that it doesn't matter whether if it's in person or if it's virtual, any interaction or any relationship that you have with people is just as important as regardless of what they are. So I just want to bring that up too.
Kevin, that's awesome. Thank you. That's so rich. Thank you so much. This isn't our first emergence, anticipated emergence from hard times. The world's emerged from pandemics, from wars, and in some parts of the world, as we all know, is managing what they're managing a version of the pandemic reality that is unimaginable because they're in active war zones and they're in active weather zones. They're in active starvation and other illness zones, some chronically. And I think what this is, this year and these days have done for us has been, I know in our household, there's been a lot of, we've always just found ourselves sort of feeling blessed about the things that we've had a chance to do or been able to do. I think that's a little bit of how we find ourselves, but we've been more mindful, and I think might have been Caroline and maybe one of the other speakers who pointed out all of this year and all of these experiences have been inequitably distributed. Certainly, we know that as you know, we've experienced this in probably pretty universally frightening ways, but with different consequences or different risks involved. Everyone's had a degree or a dimension of fear, some intensively. Probably all families by now have had illness in them, either in an extended family. We've had 5 family members who've had COVID. Unfortunately, most are fine. One is still not. And these are extended family relatives in North Carolina and in upstate New York, all ages 20 to 95, and one not doing so well. We hope Cousin Bruce will come out of ICU after his month there, but we don't know. So you start to see our families and yourselves in the newspapers, right? We watch the news and we're them, right? They're us, and each of us has a community or neighbors or people up the street or across the way or at work or somewhere who's had a bad time with this, perhaps by having illness. We've had colleagues who've had this and students, and some people who've had worse, who haven't survived their time. So we're aware of all of those relativizing sort of GPSing that we do with ourselves. This wasn't such a bad week. Well, but it really was a terrible week for a lot of people, and we kind of note that. And I think as social workers, we're aware of both the privilege that we have implicitly as professionals, the opportunity to do our work, to receive education, to work with colleagues, and also the opportunity to really see the difficulties and the criticality, therefore, of our being skilled, ready, flexible, resourced, self-cared for, so that we're the best version of ourselves to provide whatever clients need. So we know this is an ongoing conversation. But these are new variations. I read a lot about how did our country come out of the first large 1918 pandemic. I've done a lot of reading there. Learned that a family member died, a 25-year-old family member died in Boston from that. That hit young people quite hard in those days. And it's interesting what you sort of get a handle on. Every war, large-scale war, any scale war, I suppose, involves an emerging from the condition of war, separation, disaster, catastrophe, illness, death, and the like, and the coming out. And I call it coming out. It's the all clear being sounded when people emerge from wherever they've been. And we have an all clear in front of us, and it's coming incrementally, it would appear, through vaccinations, through testing, through emergences into liver spaces with each other, and all of the predictions that people like health experts, Dr. Fauci and new CDC director, are kind of giving us a bit of a timetable, but it's likely we'll be in a more connecting place, a more communicating place in person before too long. But this is kind of a new one on us. This a year ago. We really weren't talking actively exactly a year ago about this, and in about 3 weeks that all changed. And as we kind of rewind and look at what were we doing a year ago this day, I know in my family we're saying it was last year we did this very thing, and we're both marveling at how fast the time has gone and how slow the time has gone, how much it has felt. Well, I'm wondering if anybody has anything else. I have two quick things I want to say, but I end with, I think, but I don't. I know we've got a few minutes, and I want to just make sure that people feel an opportunity to be present and share the good words they have if they'd like.
Mark, this is me again. Just really quickly, I wanted to hear from the students, if possible, and from our four speakers today, if they could speak a little bit about, we talk about supervision, we talk about supervision as a protective factor, as something that helps us build resilience as part of our self-care practice, right? So I was wondering if the students could speak a little bit, any of you, regarding your experiences with that, and how in a pandemic have you really been able to utilize supervision in your field placements, in your employment, anything that sort of has helped you move forward.
What a great question. Shaylin, I wonder, you kind of, I made notes about that, and I don't know if I could just ask you to respond, but all of the students on the panel, please.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Shaylin, I was just talking about supervision and wondering if any of the students could respond to how this has been helpful to you as you move through your work, either in internships or employment during the pandemic.
Thank you. Yeah, so supervision, I'm lucky that at my field placement, there's a group of us there. So we do supervision as a group, and that has been very helpful because we've been able to, over the last semester when we all started there until now, we've all been able to really bond over not only the experiences we have at our placement, but the experience of providing these services within a pandemic and how challenging that can be, and how some of the things we hear in the crisis line and then going back to our families. So just being able to have that space to go, to talk about it, to leave it there and feel like we don't have to carry it around has been tremendously helpful.
I'll also add, we also at my residential program where I'm interning, we have supervision each week as a group, and that has been really helpful, because what our liaison says is she wants us each to go around and mention our success of the week and our fumbles of the week. So they really turn it into, camaraderie, laughter, and we laugh from each other about each other's experiences, but then we also know how to put the laughter to the side and say, you know what, I think you did a great job. You may have thought that it didn't go well, but we really think you handled the situation well. So just recently I had a moment where it was um what is the what is the term, somewhat, when you're triggered by something that your client has spoke to you about. I can't
Transference.
there we go. So I had a incident of that, and so I brought that to the group, and it was, you know, it was emotional because I was really triggered that day, and I brought that to the group, and they said, you know, we're literally talking about social workers who have been in the field for 20 plus years. And she said, you know, I have that often. You know, if there's been an incident that a client brings up, and you know, it triggers something that happened a few years ago. What you experienced is something that we all do. So that was really comforting and supportive to know that seasoned clinicians are going through and experience the same thing. And she gave really good advice on how to work through that and be in tune with your emotions and your feelings, that it's okay, because we're all human, and a lot of us chose social work because we've experienced personal circumstances and we want to help others go through, similar struggles and adversity. So group has been really great. And at my internship, she always says, if you ever want one-on-one and individual supervision as well, let me know. So it's been really supportive where I'm at. Thank you for the question.
So, yeah, I also work at a suicide prevention hotline, and it's just like, sometimes you just think, okay, so like I'm so worried, like they stopped, talking, like, well, then you're like, then your supervisor could be like, well, maybe they weren't ready to open up, you did everything right, everything you could. But sometimes like you put all that stress and pressure on yourself to always make it right, but you really you really can't. You can only encourage them like from like sort of a harm reduction sort. That's not even the right term, but like sort of a harm reduction sort of approach. And like basically just remember, like, you may have been the only person who was willing to at least give them a shot, right?
I would say for me, supervision has been super supportive. I came into the situation where I was transitioning from one job to a new position, and my supervision was like, okay, well, let's figure out a way to make your field work for you while you're trying to learn a whole new job and learning new things, and still trying to learn new things within, field. And honestly, I'd say it's all virtual, my field placement, but they have been super supportive as far as helping me along the way to find and navigate my way through being virtual, but also still learning the core concepts that I need to learn for this program. There's been times where my supervision was like, I was so overwhelmed. I was overburdened because I'm working in a trauma center where I'm seeing traumas every single day. People coming in haven't done that kind of work in a long, long time. And I had a moment. She was just like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "To be honest, I'm not." I said, I want to be present for the supervision right now. I said, but honestly, I can't. And she was just like, "It's okay." She was like, "What do you need from us?" And I think that's the biggest thing coming into a program. When I researched on different social work programs, this was the only one, not to toot Rutgers' own horn, but this was the only one that I felt really incorporated the everyday master student. because we work, we have jobs. Everybody has their own day to day. And I didn't see another program that had different program outlets where intensive weekends, 100% online. Do you want a traditional or do you want on and off campus or a hybrid to incorporate the all-encompassing student? Like, I couldn't find that from other programs that I researched and looked. Like, I couldn't find that, and to have a field placement to even do the same thing, like that was very encouraging for me. And it just reminded me why I chose this university and why I chose this degree, because a lot of people would always be like, well, why did you choose Rutgers? It's so expensive. It's so this. I said, it's beyond the price. It's what is being brought to me, what is given to me, what am I learning throughout this journey. So
Thank you so much for those. You all have been amazing. I mean, Mark, maybe we should record this, and and we are recording it, but this would be great for Laura.
Our
Mark
admissions.
Antonio to give admissions. I was like, oh my God, we just had this speech, but from my, from my heart, deepest gratitude for you guys sharing your experiences with supervision, because we talk about it all the time, about it being something that, helps us to be resilient and face the pandemic. But just hearing it from you gives it a whole different level of meaning. So thank you.
Thank you, Rupa, so much. And to characterize it as protective factors, what were those features? And this, I think the students spoke to that so well. Well, we're at time, folks. I hate to end it, but I'm going to end it if you don't mind. I think you all might be familiar with Amanda Gorman, who was the poet laureate who spoke at the inauguration, and then also at the Super Bowl. Who, go figure, this is a 22-year-old shining star poet who just, I think we're going to be hearing more from. And I was tuned into poet laureates back in the end of 2020 when the New York Times issued a call to all state poet laureates. Now, Amanda Gorman wasn't a poet laureate yet and didn't respond to this in particular, but almost every state in the country has a poet laureate. New Jersey, for the moment, doesn't. One other state doesn't, but almost all responded. And really, it was verses. The name of the article was "Verses versus Virus," and it was a solicitation to all poets about gratitude. What do you want to say about 2020? And the Times reported 33 responses. I'm just going to read you one. And this was, they were powerful, and they were depicting poet laureates' reflections on their own states and their own places. But there were, this one in particular I want to read, and their poet laureate is from the state of Illinois, and her name is Angela Jackson. And she writes, giving thanks. Illinois 2020, we give thanks for red cardinals that appear anywhere, for violets pristine and tender, and tall white oaks that bear the weight of Midwestern winds, moving across the prairie state. Thanks for the kiss of the great Lake Michigan on a big Chicago, bodacious and bursting with promises. Thanks for the lakes and rivers that flow through a state of dreams and blood and tears, thin rivers of toil that lace the land, and a big river, Mississippi, that runs. Thanks for mid-cities churning industry, for rural places poised on tractors and way stations, peopled with all kinds of people and colors, all colors, a one in the land of Lincoln, lifting freedom, union. Yes, we pray for each other in all our heartbreaks. We give thanks for hope, for family, for dear ones and neighbors, for I love you. Written on the red wings of cardinals, on the sweet petals of violets, on the strong brown branches of oaks, we give thanks and thanks and thanks. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you when the all clear sounds, if not before. Thank you all. Be well.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's good to see you guys again. Be safe.
Thanks so much.
Thank you
Stay
all.
safe.
Take care.
Take care. Be well. Wonderful to see everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Be well. Take care. Thanks, everyone.